Have you ever had a moment in your life where everything seems perfectly normal until it's not? 1 minute, you're talking to someone, laughing with them, living your life. The next moment, it's all gone. And you're left asking yourself, how could something like this happen? This is the story of Patricia Falkenstern, an artist, a mother, and a woman whose life was violently stolen from her in the most senseless way possible. This case isn't just about a woman's murder. It's about betrayal. It's about the unraveling of trust. It's about a crime so personal, so horrific, that it feels like a nightmare you just can't wake up from. It's about the moments leading up to the murder of a woman who had no idea that a simple argument would spiral into something far worse than anyone could imagine. Welcome to the twisted story of Patricia Falkenstern's last moments and how one man's rage would change the lives of everyone around her forever. Welcome to Mystery Unveiled, True Crime. Thank you, my viewers. A special thank you to our loyal subscribers for joining us as we uncover the darkest, most gripping true crime stories every single day. Your support fuels our mission to bring you both infamous cases and chilling untold mysteries. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Patricia Falkenstern was, on the surface, just like so many others, an ordinary woman with extraordinary talents. She was an artist who had a quiet, private life, one that revolved around her love for animals, painting, pottery, and everything creative. But there was more to Patricia than just her art. She was a mother, a daughter, and a person who cared deeply about the world around her. Raised in Grand Rapids, Patricia had moved to Ann Arbor in her later years, seeking a quieter life, but still maintaining her passion for all things artistic. She was the kind of person who preferred to stay out of the limelight, letting her work speak for itself. She didn't crave attention, she craved peace. And she found it at Blank Slate Creamery in Ann Arbor, where her artwork adorned the walls of the shop for years. But in 2022, Patricia's life came to an abrupt and tragic end of life, cut short by a person she had trusted. At 62 years old, Kwiecinski wasn't some stranger off the street. He was someone who had been in Patricia's life for a while. Someone she had let into her home. Someone she had trusted, at least enough to share space with him in her Ann Arbor apartment. But Kwiecinski had a dark side that no one, not even Patricia, could have known about until it was too late. The morning of August 30, 2022, Patricia and Kwiecinski got into an argument. It wasn't anything unusual at first. Just a disagreement between two people living together. But this argument, about stolen food, would trigger something inside Kwiecinski that would spiral out of control. And what started as a petty dispute would end in Patricia's death. According to Kwiecinski's later confession, the argument escalated quickly. Patricia had confronted him about the food that was delivered by the Meals on Wheels program, a service that Patricia relied on. Kwiecinski, for reasons only known to him, snapped. It wasn't a fight over stolen property or money. It was over food. Food that had no real value, except in that moment when Kwiecinski's anger took over. The argument turned physical. And in a fit of rage, Kwiecinski strangled Patricia with a vacuum cleaner cord. Now, let that sink in for a second. A vacuum cleaner cord. Something so simple, yet so deadly. It's a chilling though something so mundane could be turned into a weapon of destruction. But Kwiecinski didn't stop there. He didn't just take Patricia's life. He desecrated her body afterward in an act of pure malice, a final act that would haunt anyone who learned the truth. 2 days later, a Meals on Wheels worker arrived at Patricia's apartment, as she did every day. But something felt off. Kwiecinski was there, again. He claimed that Patricia was sleeping, and he would take the food for her. But this wasn't normal. Patricia always accepted her meals herself. Something wasn't right. The worker, sensing that something was wrong, made the call to the police, asking for a welfare check. And that call would be the thing that saved the investigation, the thing that would eventually lead to Kwiecinski's arrest. When police arrived, they found Patricia's body, and the horror of the situation was undeniable. The investigation revealed the extent of the crime. Kwiecinski wasn't just a bystander in this tragedy. He was the one who had ended Patricia's life. He confessed to everything in shocking detail: how he had strangled her, how he had done unspeakable things to her body after her death. And as the details unfolded, it became clear that this wasn't just a random act of violence. This was a calculated, deliberate act of betrayal. Patricia's family, especially her daughter Ileana, was left to deal with the fallout of Kwiecinski's actions. And while no sentence could bring Patricia back, the legal system would soon do what it could to ensure Kwiecinski would pay for what he had done. All right, so we've got a woman, Patricia Falkenstern, dead in her own apartment. We've got a Meals on Wheels delivery driver with a gut feeling that something ain't right. And we've got Keith Kwiecinski standing in the hallway like he's just been caught eating the last slice of cake. Except it's not cake, it's murder. Yeah, this is where things get dark, real fast. The cops show up for the welfare check. They knock. No answer. Then they go in and find Patricia's body. She's gone. And not just gone, under the most twisted, horrifying circumstances imaginable. You know how in movies, there's that moment when the detective walks into a room and just knows something's messed up? That's what this was. Patricia wasn't just lying peacefully. This wasn't an accident. The scene screamed foul play. Strangulation marks, the cord, and worst of all evidence of mutilation. And sitting right in the middle of this horror movie in real life? Good old Keith Kwiecinski, just chillin'. Now, let's talk about how fast this guy folded under pressure. Like, you know when someone lies and they're really bad at it? That was Keith. The second they got him in a room, it was like he couldn't wait to talk. He told detectives everything. He said he got into a fight with Patricia over stolen food from Meals on Wheels. I'm sorry, what? This guy committed murder over meatloaf and mashed potatoes? But yeah, that's what he said. He claimed Patricia accused him of taking food, and in a moment of rage, he just snapped, grabbed a vacuum cleaner cord and strangled her, like it was nothing. And then came the detail that made everyone in that room go cold. He admitted to sexually assaulting her after she was dead. Let me be clear, this wasn't just murder. This was depravity at its worst. It was the kind of crime that even seasoned homicide detectives have nightmares about. But here's what really hurts. Patricia Falkenstern wasn't just some random name in the news. She was someone's mother, someone's daughter. A talented artist. A woman who had lived a quiet life after years of chasing her creative dreams. She studied at Kendall College of Art and Design. She lived in Manhattan. She painted, made pottery. She even acted. And then she moved to Ann Arbor, working at a local ice cream shop, Blank Slate Creamery, where her artwork was known and loved. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud. She was private, peaceful. The kind of person who wanted to live her life quietly and die quietly. And yet, she was given the complete opposite. Ileana Falkenstern, Patricia's daughter, was devastated. And who wouldn't be? She stood in court later and said it best. My mother did not deserve to have her life extinguished without her consent. Boom. Straight up truth. She went on to say her mom would miss birthdays, holidays, weddings, and grandchildren. That hits you right in the gut. Her mom was 65. She had more life to live, and it was stolen. Brutally. Senselessly. Then there was Carl Falkenstern, Patricia's former husband. He stood in court and looked Keith dead in the eyes and said, "You're getting your legal judgment today, but one day you'll have to stand before your God and answer for the things you've done." Now here's where things get legally frustrating. Instead of taking this circus to trial, Keith took a plea deal. He pleaded, no contest. Basically saying, yeah, I'm not gonna fight this, but I'm also not technically admitting guilt. Classic weak move. The judge sentenced him to 25 years to life for second-degree murder and up to 10 years for mutilating a dead body, served concurrently. That's right at the same time. So, 25 years. Possibly out on parole in a couple decades if some board thinks he's reformed. Is that justice? I mean, what's 25 years compared to the eternal silence Patricia's family has to live with? Her daughter said it best again. Even his death would not be satisfactory recompense. And she's right. Patricia's not coming back. Her artwork, her spirit, her love, it's all been taken. Even Judge Ariane Slay, who presided over the case, seemed torn. She said, "There's no sentence that can be delivered today that will right this wrong." And let's be honest, there really isn't. This wasn't just a crime. It was a complete destruction of trust, safety, and dignity. And the best the justice system could do was lock him up and hope he rots quietly. Alright, so picture this. It's a quiet Thursday morning in downtown Ann Arbor. People walking their dogs, sipping coffee, heading to work. You pass by Courthouse Square Apartments, a senior living building right in the heart of the city. Nothing about it screams crime scene. But behind one of those apartment doors, an absolute nightmare had just unfolded. When news broke that Patricia Falkenstern was murdered in her home, and not just murdered, but brutally murdered, it hit the community like a sucker punch to the gut. This wasn't some random alleyway shooting or gang-related hit. This was a woman who lived in a senior complex. She got Meals on Wheels. She painted murals on the wall of a local creamery. She was a neighbor, a friend, someone people saw all the time and never thought twice about. And Keith? He wasn't some stranger lurking in the shadows. He was known to that building. He lived there too, got Meals on Wheels just like she did, which made everything worse. This was someone who gained Patricia's trust and then used that trust to end her life. Suddenly, people were locking their doors in broad daylight. Residents who used to say hi in the hallway were now walking faster, heads down, avoiding eye contact. And every person who had a mother or grandmother living alone in Ann Arbor was asking themselves the same question. Could this happen to her too? Remember how I said Patricia was an artist? Well, one of the most heartbreaking things to happen after her death was what happened at Blank Slate Creamery. That's the little ice cream shop downtown where Patricia used to decorate the chalkboard walls. After the news broke, the staff quietly wiped away all the art. Not out of disrespect, but out of grief, out of pain. They couldn't look at it without thinking about what happened. That little shop had been Patricia's second home, from 2015 to 2020. She wasn't just an employee, she was part of the soul of that place. People came in asking about her, and staff had to explain, over and over and over again. Yes, she passed. No, it wasn't natural. Yes, it was bad. And that pain rippled out like a shockwave, through Ann Arbor, through her former art circles, through her family, through everyone who ever called her a friend. Red flags and regret? Could this have been prevented? Let's be real, when crimes like this happen, everyone starts looking back, asking the hard questions. What were the signs? Could this have been stopped? And here's where it gets really frustrating. Some people had concerns about Keith Kwasinski. He was known to have issues. He had a past. He had a record. He wasn't a model citizen by any stretch. But nobody expected this. Meals on Wheels staff said they got suspicious right away. Day one, they show up, and Keith answers Patricia's door like, "Yeah, she's asleep. I'll take her food." Suspicious? Definitely. But the dude was also a program recipient. He was familiar. He didn't look dangerous. He just looked there. Like a guy who blended into the background. Day two, same thing. Keith answers the door again. "She's still asleep." That's when the delivery worker was like, "Nah, something's wrong." And that's the moment this whole case hinged on. That one person trusting their gut, saying, "Nope, I'm calling this in." And thank God they did. Here's another hard pill to swallow. Patricia may have never even known she was in danger. Keith was someone she likely interacted with regularly. She probably didn't think twice about letting him in. That's the danger of trust. It's a double-edged sword. She was private, quiet, a little reclusive. That doesn't make her weak. That makes her vulnerable in the eyes of predators like Keith. And if she did feel threatened at any point, it's very likely she would have kept it to herself. That's how she was. No drama, no fuss. Just handling her own life in peace. Until that peace was shattered. So let's talk about Keith for a second. What kind of person commits this level of violence and then mutilates the body? And then sexually assaults it post-mortem? We're talking about someone who's not just a murderer. We're talking about a psychological horror show. Someone with no empathy, no control, no moral compass. His story? Boring. No big trauma, no dark twisted backstory that would make you say, well, that explains it. Nope. Just decades of bad decisions, substance issues, and a growing resentment toward the world around him. And in that moment over some stolen meat or whatever lie he told himself, he snapped. But let's be clear, snapping doesn't turn someone into a monster unless they were already one to begin with. Now, let's go back to court for a second. Judge Slay wasn't sugarcoating anything. She said it straight up. There's no sentence that will right this wrong. And that's exactly what everyone was thinking. Like, yeah, Keith's getting 25 to life. He'll probably die in prison. But that doesn't bring Patricia back. That doesn't erase the trauma. That doesn't undo the years of silence she should have had to create her art, love her family, and live out her life in peace. That's the thing about true crime. Sometimes there's no closure, just consequences. It's sentencing day. The courtroom's packed, family, reporters, a couple community members who just needed to see this with their own eyes. The room feels like it's holding its breath. And then there's Keith Kwasinski, the man of the hour, sitting there, stone-faced, like he's waiting for a dentist appointment instead of facing the full force of the justice system. Cold. No emotion, no remorse, just blank. Here's where it gets weird and, honestly, maddening. When Judge Slay opens the floor for Keith to speak, this is his moment. The moment to say sorry, to try to be a human being for once in his life. And what does he do? Absolutely. Freaking nothing. He doesn't say a word. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I regret it." Not even a fake tear or a shaky voice. Just a grown man sitting there like a cinder block, while the people whose lives he shattered spill their guts in front of him. Bro, you took someone's mother, someone's friend, someone's light, and you can't even acknowledge it? That's silence? That's louder than anything he could have said. That silence was a middle finger to everyone in that room. But then comes the fire. Patricia Falkenstern, Patricia's eldest daughter, steps up. And man, she doesn't just speak. She erupts with grief, pain, and truth. No script, no fake courtroom language, just raw emotion. My mother did not deserve to have her life extinguished without her consent. She did not deserve to miss out on family birthdays, weddings, grandchildren. And then she drops the line that left the whole courtroom gutted. Even his death would not be satisfactory recompense. My mother is not coming back. That's when you felt the weight of the room drop to the floor. That right there, that's not vengeance, that's not hatred. That's just the ache of someone who lost the one person in her life who was never supposed to be taken from her like that. Then Carl Falkenstern gets up, Patricia's former husband, the man who once built a life with her. And he isn't sugarcoating a damn thing. You're getting your legal judgment today. But one day, you're going to stand before your God, whoever that is, and you'll have to answer for this. Now, I don't care what you believe in karma, cosmic justice, spiritual judgment, but when a grieving father looks you dead in the eyes and says, "You'll never escape this," that hits deep. That's not just a courtroom speech. That's a curse. So the hammer drops. Judge Slay gives Keith 25 years to life for second-degree murder, plus up to 10 years for mutilating a corpse. But, and this part stings, the sentences run concurrently. So, basically, he's serving both at the same time, meaning he's eligible for parole in 25 years. Now let's do the math. Keith is 62. Add 25 to that, and we're looking at 87 years old before he could possibly get out. Will he even make it that far? Probably not, but that's not the point. The point is, the possibility is still there. And for Patricia's family, that possibility feels like an insult, because she doesn't get another 25 years. She doesn't get a second chance. Judge Ariane Slay tried to hold the balance, tried to do her job, tried to find the sentence that would feel like justice. But even she admitted, there's no sentence that can right this wrong. She even acknowledged Patricia's privacy, saying that maybe a drawn-out trial would have gone against who she was. Quiet, humble, private. A woman who didn't want fanfare, not even in death. What we do have left is the opportunity to protect the community, she said. And that's the truth. The only thing the justice system could do here was lock up Keith Kwasinski and keep him away from the rest of the world. Because while they couldn't fix the past, they could prevent another Patricia from being next. All right, we've talked about the monster, we've talked about the courtroom, we've talked about the grief. But now, it's time to shift the spotlight. Because before all of this, before Keith Kwasinski, before the trial, before the headlines, there was Patricia Falkenstern. She was so much more than a crime victim. She was a force of life, an artist, a free spirit, a mother, and people loved her for exactly who she was. Patricia was born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And let me tell you, she wasn't one of those 9 to 5 and that's it types. Nope. She had color in her veins, art in her bones. From a young age, she was painting, sketching, making clay sculptures. The world was her canvas, and she painted it in her own quiet, beautiful way. She didn't chase clout. She wasn't trying to make it big. She just wanted to express something real, something personal. Now, here's where it gets cinematic. She packed her bags and moved to freaking Manhattan. That's right, from Michigan to the Big Apple, chasing creativity and living that raw bohemian lifestyle. She studied, painted, acted. This was a woman who wore many hats and did it gracefully. She wasn't looking for the spotlight. She was chasing meaning. And in that mess of art galleries and underground theaters, Patricia carved out her little corner of magic. But even in New York, she never lost that Midwest heart. The quiet strength, the kindness, the give you the last piece of pie kind of soul. Eventually, Patricia returned to Michigan and settled in Ann Arbor, a city that honestly matched her vibe. Artsy, low-key, full of thinkers, doers, dreamers, she fit right in. From 2015 to 2020, she worked at Blank Slate Creamery, not just scooping ice cream, but literally turning the place into an art gallery. She decorated their blackboard walls with chalk art that stopped people in their tracks. It wasn't just cute drawings either. Her pieces told stories. They had depth. People came in for dessert and left talking about that one sketch by Patricia. But here's the thing. Despite her talents, Patricia didn't crave attention. She kept her circle small, her life private, and her peace sacred. She didn't need the world to clap for her. She just needed her paints, her clay, her books, and her family. She wasn't flashy, but she mattered to the people who really knew her. And that's what makes her murder even more brutal. She wasn't out there starting drama. She wasn't living reckless. She was just trying to enjoy her golden years painting, helping others, and watching her daughters grow. One of the few public threads we have into her life was her connection to Meals on Wheels. She was a recipient, yes, but not because she was helpless. She just accepted help with grace, because that's who she was. Even the delivery staff remembered her fondly, always kind, always smiling, always grateful. It's why they noticed when something felt off. Patricia never missed a meal, never let someone else speak for her. When Keith answered that door and said she was just sleeping, alarms went off. Now, here's what gets me. Patricia may be gone, but her fingerprints are still all over Ann Arbor. Her art lives on, her warmth echoes in the stories people tell. Her daughters, Ileana especially, are determined to make sure the world knows who she was, not just how she died. My mother was not just a victim. She was a vibrant soul, a private woman, a kind heart, Ileana said, and I will make sure her story is remembered for her life, not his crime. So, now we've met Patricia, a woman of grace, privacy, and undeniable talent. But this part is where we plunge into the grimy, twisted psychology of the man who took her life. And I'm warning you, it gets disturbing. Because Keith Kwiecinski wasn't just some guy who snapped. What he did before, during, and especially after the murder, shows a level of detachment that'll send a chill down your spine. Let's rewind to August 30, 2022. Keith and Patricia get into a fight. Over what? According to him, stolen meat. Yeah, you heard that right. Keith was also getting food from the Meals on Wheels program. Apparently, he thought Patricia had something to do with some missing food. Or maybe he just imagined it. Either way, they argued. Instead of walking away, instead of taking a breath, Keith decided he was judge, jury, and executioner. In his own words, Keith said he snapped, that he grabbed the vacuum cleaner cord and strangled Patricia. But snapped doesn't explain what happened next, not even close. This wasn't a panic moment. This was someone taking deliberate, extended action to end another person's life, slowly, up close, personally. The worst part? He didn't even pretend to be remorseful. He didn't try to call for help. He didn't cry. He didn't collapse. He just moved on like it was business as usual. Now comes the part that's hard to even say out loud. After murdering her, Keith admitted to sexually assaulting her dead body. Yeah, let that sink in. This wasn't just a killing. It was a full-on dehumanization of a woman who had never wronged him, a woman who let him into her life, who shared meals with him, trusted him. What kind of person does that? A sick one, a dangerous one, a person who doesn't just take a life, they stomp on the memory of it. You'd think he'd run, hide, try to flee the scene, but nope, Keith stayed right there. And when the Meals on Wheels worker came by later that day, Keith told them Patricia was sleeping. Then he did it again 2 days later. Greeted the same worker at the door, smiled, and said the same thing. Patricia's still sleeping. Bro, what? It's like he thought he could gaslight the world. Like maybe if he said it enough times it'd be true. But here's where it all unraveled for Keith. That Meals on Wheels worker, they trusted their gut. They knew Patricia, and they knew something wasn't right. She never let anyone else speak for her. She never skipped a meal, and she sure as hell didn't sleep for 48 hours straight. So they made the call a welfare check. And that one phone call, it cracked the case wide open. Police entered the apartment and found the horrifying truth. When detectives brought Keith in, he didn't even try to dodge. He laid it all out. The fight, the cord, the body, the assault. He confessed without a shred of emotion, like he was explaining how he put together a coffee table. Calm, robotic, soulless. Even the investigators were shaken. Because you expect fear, regret, something. But Keith? He just seemed empty. All right, so we've covered the crime. We've seen Keith's sick confession. Now it's time to see how it all came crashing down. Because you don't just kill someone, lie about it to a Meals on Wheels worker, and expect to walk away like it's a Tuesday. When Patricia Falkenstern's body was discovered, the shockwaves hit fast, and they hit hard. The 911 call that changed everything. So it's September 1, 2022. The police roll up to Patricia's apartment after that gut check welfare call. And when they get there, boom. It's exactly what that staffer feared. Patricia wasn't sleeping. She was dead, already starting to decompose. And the scene? It told them everything they needed to know. This was no accident. No fall, no natural death, no peaceful passing. This was murder, cold, deliberate, and brutal. Detectives didn't have to search far. Keith was still lingering around the apartment building, still trying to play it cool. But once they cuffed him and sat him down, he didn't protest. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He just started talking, like a guy who knew it was over. We got into a fight. She pissed me off. I grabbed the cord. I strangled her. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he added the unthinkable. I did things to her body afterward. Sexual things. He said it, on record. No shame. No soul. Here's where the legal system puts on its gloves. Keith Kwiecinski was charged with second-degree murder, mutilation of a dead body, and a dash of depravity that didn't need a legal title because everyone already knew what he was. He pled no contest, which means he wasn't technically admitting guilt, but he also wasn't denying it. He basically said, do what you're gonna do. And the court? Oh, they were gonna do plenty. Ann Arbor isn't the kind of place where this stuff happens every day. It's a city full of artists, students, activists, retirees. So when word got out that Patricia had been murdered in cold blood, it didn't just make news, it shattered people. People from the creamery where she used to work started posting memorials. Old art friends came out of the woodwork, sharing her sketches, her pottery, her chalk murals. Neighbors cried in public. Total strangers lit candles. People weren't just grieving a murder victim, they were grieving a soul taken way too soon. Her daughter speaks Ileana's fury. At the center of it all was Patricia's daughter, Patricia Falkenstern. And let me tell you, this woman came with fire in her voice. My mother did not deserve to have her life extinguished without her consent. There's no sentence today that will right this wrong. Even his death would not be satisfactory recompense. She wasn't just mourning, she was speaking for every child who's ever lost a parent to violence. She wanted the court to understand this wasn't just about one woman dying. April 26, 2024. Almost 2 years since Patricia Falkenstern's murder. The courtroom is packed, not with media, not with gawkers, but with people who loved her. This isn't just a sentencing hearing, it's a funeral that never got a proper ending. It's closure wrapped in legal tape. And at the center of it all, Keith Kwiecinski, sitting there, silent, cold, like a man already dead inside. When Judge Slay walked into the courtroom, you could feel it. This wasn't going to be a soft-spoken, half-hearted bench speech. She was here to make sure Patricia's death was not forgotten. There's no sentence that can be delivered today that will right this wrong. She was right. What do you do with someone like Keith? A man who didn't just kill a woman, he destroyed every memory of her in one twisted, selfish act. Keith got hit with 25 years to life for second-degree murder. On top of that, up to 10 years for mutilating a dead body. But here's the thing, those sentences run concurrently, which means he serves them at the same time. Translation? He could technically be eligible for parole in 25 years. Which, if you're doing the math, makes him about 87 when that door might open. Will he make it that long? Probably not. But for Patricia's family, that number doesn't matter, because she's never coming back. When it came time for Keith to speak, to say sorry, to offer even the smallest human emotion, he said nothing. Not a single word. No apology, no fake tears, no, I made a mistake. He just sat there like a statue, which, honestly, hurt more than anything he could have said, because that silence? It screamed one thing louder than anything else. He doesn't care. Then came Carl Falkenstern, Patricia's former spouse. If there's anything harder than burying the mother of your kids, it's looking her killer in the eye and finding the words. You're getting your judgment, legal judgment today. In the future, you're going to have to stand before your God, whoever that God is, and you're going to have to atone for the things you've done. It wasn't angry, it was honest. And it hit like a punch in the chest. Patricia's life was full of color. Paintings, chalkboard murals, pottery, poems. The art on the walls of Blank Slate Creamery wasn't just doodles, they were hers. And now, they're all that's left. Ileana said her mother was a deeply private person. She wouldn't have wanted a huge funeral or a courtroom spectacle, but she got one anyway. Because when someone takes your life like this, the silence becomes a scream. We hope you take this time away to seek forgiveness and atonement in any way that you can. But let's be honest, Keith probably won't. He'll rot in a cell, maybe draw on the wall, maybe think about Patricia, maybe not. But the truth? He doesn't deserve to be remembered. Let's hit pause on the horror for a second. Because this story isn't just about how Patricia died, it's about how she lived. Yeah, that part deserves just as much attention, maybe more. Born to create, the Grand Rapids girl with big dreams. Patricia was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan. A Midwest kid with a quiet strength and an even louder imagination. By the time most kids were figuring out multiplication tables, Patricia was already sketching faces, painting skies, and molding things out of clay. Art wasn't a hobby, it was a language, her way of making sense of the world. In her 20s, she took a bold leap. Manhattan. Now, if you've never been to NYC as an artist, let me explain. It's like walking into a lion's den with nothing but a paintbrush. You either get eaten alive or you leave your mark on the walls. Patricia? She fought, she painted, she acted, she lived. She didn't chase fame. She chased expression. She didn't want a spotlight, she wanted to connect. And that's exactly what she did. Kendall College of Art and Design, mastering her craft. Eventually, she returned to Michigan to study at Kendall College of Art and Design. Not because she needed a diploma to validate her talent, she already had that, but because she wanted to keep growing. She dove into pottery, mixed media, chalk art. She played with color like it was a second language. People said when she picked up a brush, she wasn't painting, she was breathing. From 2015 to 2020, Patricia worked at Blank Slate Creamery in downtown Ann Arbor. But don't think ice cream shop, think canvas. Every time you walked in, the blackboard walls told a story. Seasonal doodles, whimsical quotes, intricate scenes, all drawn by Patricia. Freehand, no outlines, no tracing, just pure art. Customers remembered her not just for the scoops, but for the way she lit up the space. She made dessert an experience. Patricia wasn't flashy, she wasn't loud, but she had this unshakable energy about her. Her daughter Ileana said she was a private person. Someone who didn't ask for much, just a little space, some quiet, and time to create. She loved animals. She was kind. And when she loved you with her whole heart. But don't get it twisted, she wasn't weak. She was strong in a way the world didn't always recognize. The kind of strong that didn't need to shout, it just stood tall. When Keith Kwiecinski killed Patricia, he didn't just take her life, he erased chapters that were still being written. Future birthdays with her daughters. Late night talks over tea. The chance to hold her first grandchild. The next painting. The next poem. The next memory. We don't get those back, not ever. The people she left behind. Ileana, her sister, her ex-husband Carl, old friends from art school, former co-workers from Blank Slate, people she inspired without even knowing it. They're the ones carrying her story now, keeping her alive in photos, in stories, in chalkboards that will never be erased. We've already heard the horrific details. We've seen the confession, the arrest, the sentence. But who was Keith Kwiecinski before he became a murderer? What made him snap? Was he always this way? Or did something inside him change? Keith Kwiecinski wasn't a stranger to the system, but he wasn't some off-the-radar psycho either. He wasn't the guy whose name you'd read in true crime books or see in documentaries about psychotic criminals. But maybe that's exactly the point, because a guy like Keith, just your regular run-of-the-mill dude, can easily slip under the radar. And that's the most dangerous part. Born in Michigan, Keith's early life wasn't marked by any glaring red flags. No history of violent crime. No serial offenses. No signs of uncontrolled rage. But sometimes, that's the most chilling part of the story. It's not the obvious monsters you need to watch for. It's the ones who blend in so well you never even think to look twice. Keith's life was dotted with struggles that weren't exactly out of the ordinary. He bounced from job to job, lived in various places. He didn't exactly have the most stable existence. He wasn't a career criminal, but he had a history of bad relationships, substance abuse, and a tendency to spiral when life didn't go his way. But who doesn't, right? We all have our demons, some more visible than others. So what made Keith's demons different? Why did he turn into a killer? One thing that stood out in Keith's life, and it's something that would eventually define his relationship with Patricia, was his intense isolation. Keith didn't seem to have many close friends. He didn't engage with his family in a meaningful way. He lived on the edges of society, only interacting with those who had to be there. And it wasn't just the physical distance, it was emotional. Keith didn't trust anyone. People in his life describe him as the kind of person who'd isolate himself to the point where he'd lose touch with reality. When he was around, he didn't engage. And when he wasn't, you barely noticed. He just blended into the background. The more isolated he became, the more dangerous he became, the more desperate. And when a tragedy like the death of a parent or loved one happens, that's when the pressure starts to build. Then came the argument with Patricia. And when you dig into their past interactions, it becomes clear Keith didn't know how to handle conflict. According to detectives, their argument about the stolen meat from the Meals on Wheels program was the tipping point. That was the moment where whatever restraint Keith had vanished. Was it about the meat? Probably not. Was it about his lack of control? Absolutely. At that moment, Patricia stood up to him. She pushed back. She wasn't afraid to argue with him. And that rattled him. Because when you're a man who's used to getting what he wants, that's the kind of challenge you can't tolerate. But here's the thing about Keith. The calm before the storm isn't something you can always spot. Patricia and Keith were living in close quarters in her apartment. At the time of the murder, they were not romantic partners. There was no indication that Keith had any kind of real emotional attachment to her, but he didn't need love to kill. He just needed control. The weeks leading up to the murder, Keith seemed perfectly fine. He interacted with the Meals on Wheels program without raising any suspicion. He took food from Patricia's apartment as if everything was normal. But there was something lurking under the surface. Something dark. We all have moments where we snap, where we lose control for a brief second. But for Keith, it wasn't a moment, it was a series of moments where he gradually let his grip on reality slip. He snapped in that fight with Patricia. And it wasn't about food or theft, it was about power. About taking control of a woman who wouldn't back down. And that's when he went too far. We've already talked about the brutal murder. We've dissected Keith's past. But what we haven't fully explored yet is the aftermath. Not just in terms of the victim, not just in terms of the punishment, but in terms of Keith himself. When a man like this commits such a crime, does he even see the gravity of what he's done? Let's talk about that confession for a moment. Keith didn't exactly pour his heart out when he admitted to killing Patricia. No dramatic breakdowns, no gut-wrenching apologies. He told the police the basics. He got into a fight. It escalated. He strangled her with a vacuum cord. But here's where it gets interesting. There was no real emotion in his words, just cold, clinical details. Did he feel any regret? Did he even understand the magnitude of what he had done? Or was it just another thing he did? Keith's mind wasn't built for this kind of chaos. A man who spent his life hiding in the shadows, unwilling to confront his own shortcomings, finally confronted with the reality of murder. And suddenly, the weight of it all must have been suffocating. The psychological aftermath of such an event is almost impossible to fully grasp unless you've experienced it yourself. But for someone like Keith, there was probably a nagging, creeping sense of disbelief. Was he a killer? Was that really who he'd become? If you dig deeper into the concept of a killer's mind, you can't help but ask, does someone like Keith even know they're spiraling into darkness? Or are they just swept up in their own rage and insecurities? What Keith did was not just an act of violence, it was an outlet for every single frustration, every past failure, and every time he felt powerless in his life. It was the eruption of a man who had kept his anger so buried beneath the surface that it was only a matter of time before it boiled over. Keith's apathy toward his own crime is something we can't ignore. After all, when a person shows zero remorse, it's easy to assume they simply don't care. But is that the whole story? What if Keith was suffering from delusion? A mental state where he couldn't truly comprehend the consequences of his actions. Imagine living your entire life in a fog of self-pity, where nothing ever feels real. No connection, no purpose, no empathy. Then, suddenly, your life explodes in the most horrific way possible, and for a brief moment, you're forced to face the reality of who you are. But Keith's ability to shut down that guilt and continue on with life like nothing happened, it's almost like he was numb to the act he committed. It's not that he didn't know what he did. It's that he couldn't fully comprehend it. Keith didn't exactly have a social circle. He didn't have the tight-knit support system that might have helped him face reality in a healthy way. Isn't that strange? In a way, Keith was already living in his own personal prison before the murder ever took place. He was isolated, alone, and disconnected from the world. He didn't care for friends, and he barely had family to speak of. What does a person like that do when everything they've built, or rather, destroyed, comes crashing down? The psychological aftermath, and Keith's cold indifference. But here's the dark, uncomfortable question we're left with. What if Keith didn't feel guilt at all? What if, in his mind, Patricia's death was somehow justified? Think about the way Keith rationalized his actions. It started with the argument over stolen meat from the Meals on Wheels program. A petty, mundane fight about food. But for Keith, this wasn't just an argument. It was a trigger. In his mind, Patricia had done something wrong. She had crossed a line. And in his twisted worldview, that made violence the answer. Think about it. He didn't seem to feel the weight of what he was doing. There were no signs of second thoughts, no remorse after the murder. It wasn't even about rage anymore. It was about Keith seeing himself as someone who could control the situation, win the argument, even if it meant taking a life. Now, does that sound like someone who's fully aware of the crime they've committed? Or does it sound like a person who is so far gone, they believe they're in the right? Guilt is a funny thing. Some people feel it immediately after doing something terrible. They regret their actions, and it eats them up from the inside out. But then there's the other side. The ones who don't feel that crushing weight. The ones who justify their actions. Keith might have fallen into that category. He might have never truly felt guilty. Instead, he might have felt justified in his actions, maybe even relieved that Patricia was gone. After all, she had challenged him. She had stood up to him. And in Keith's warped mind, that wasn't just a betrayal. It was a threat to his fragile sense of self-worth. In Keith's case, guilt wasn't just absent. It was replaced by delusion, a deep psychological disconnect that made him incapable of seeing the gravity of what he'd done. During his court hearing, when the victim's family spoke, Keith remained silent. He didn't even bother to explain himself, didn't apologize, didn't offer a single word of remorse. And why? Because Keith didn't think he needed to apologize. He wasn't sorry. In his mind, there was no crime, just a necessary action that needed to happen. Patricia had disrespected him. He taught her a lesson. Simple as that. This is a horrifying concept, isn't it? The idea that someone can take a life and then just walk away, not feeling the slightest ounce of remorse, the fact that Keith didn't even try to defend himself in court. It's a chilling reminder of how far removed he was from any semblance of moral understanding. So here we are. Keith Kwiecinski, a man who murdered a woman in cold blood, was sentenced to prison 25 years to life. He's behind bars, but does that really bring justice? Does it fix the broken lives left in his wake? Some might say it's a start, that the legal system has done what it's supposed to do. But does Keith ever truly atone for his actions? Could he ever feel guilty? Some killers can find redemption. Some can reflect on their actions, feel remorse, and work toward atonement. But people like Keith, people who are so wrapped up in their own delusion, so disconnected from reality, they might never truly understand what they've done. Keith Kwiecinski's life, as he knew it, is over. He's facing the reality of his crime, but will he ever pay the price that truly matters in his own mind? For now, he sits in prison, serving his time. But there's no guarantee he'll ever truly pay for the destruction he caused, not in a way that would make anyone feel satisfied. When Patricia Falkenstern was killed, it wasn't just her life that ended. It was the future of everyone who loved her, and no amount of time behind bars can change that. Ileana Falkenstern was the one to speak the loudest in the courtroom. As the eldest daughter, she didn't just lose a mother, she lost the guiding force in her life. "My mother did not deserve to have her life extinguished without her consent," she said at Keith's sentencing, her words ringing with both pain and strength. Imagine, for a moment, the weight of those words. A daughter, fighting through grief, trying to find any way to make sense of her mother's brutal death, trying to understand how a man could rip away the very foundation of her existence. Ileana's pain isn't just about losing her mother. It's about all the moments she'll never get back. The birthdays, the holidays, the grandchildren who will never meet their grandmother. It's the reality that the world her mother was supposed to be a part of, a world of love, family, and memories, has been shattered. Patricia wasn't just a mother. She was an artist, a friend, a colleague, and a light in the lives of those who knew her. She worked at Blank Slate Creamery. Her art covered the walls, brightening up the space. She was loved by her community. She was a giver, someone who brought joy to others. And then, she was gone. Taken in a moment of rage by someone who didn't even have the decency to understand the consequences of his actions. For Ileana and her family, the loss was immeasurable. It wasn't just about a person, it was about the future that was taken from them. The mother who would never walk them down the aisle. The grandmother who would never spoil her grandkids. Patricia wasn't just a mother and a wife. She was a friend to so many. Her art brought people together. Her work at the creamery touched lives. And in a small town like Ann Arbor, her absence was felt by the community as a whole. Imagine walking into a place where Patricia's art once hung on the walls and now the space feels empty. Not just because of the missing artwork, but because of the void she left behind. The Meals on Wheels program, where Patricia had once been a recipient, was shaken to its core by her brutal death. How could a community like Ann Arbor process such a senseless act? How could they understand how someone they thought they knew, someone who had no history of violence, could take someone's life so violently? The ripple effect of Patricia's death stretched far beyond her immediate family. It reached her friends, her colleagues, and even strangers who had crossed paths with her. It left everyone reeling. The Falkenstern family's road to healing will never be easy. The absence of Patricia will always be felt. But, as Ileana and Carl's words showed us, there's still a path to move forward. For Ileana, this journey might never fully heal the wounds. But as she continues to live her life, Patricia's spirit, her love of art, her care for animals, and her kindness will remain alive through her family, through her community, and through the memories that can never be erased. It's hard to find peace after something like this. Some people never do. But as much as Patricia's murder tore apart the lives of her loved ones, the legacy she left behind is something that will never die. Did Keith Kwiecinski get the justice he truly deserved? It's a question that's haunted Patricia's family since the moment they learned of her death. Because when someone is taken so brutally, can a prison sentence ever feel like enough? But here's the thing. While Keith's physical confinement may be a form of punishment, does it really bring justice? Justice isn't just about removing the criminal from society. It's about making the perpetrator accountable for their actions, about them truly understanding the harm they've caused. But Keith never once showed remorse. He didn't apologize. He didn't seem to care. He just remained silent. For Patricia's family, this is where the real tragedy lies. Keith's sentence may be legally appropriate, but does it feel like enough? Can anyone truly say they feel satisfied knowing that Keith will serve his time without ever truly facing the emotional consequences of his actions? For Ileana and her family, the murder of Patricia is more than just a legal issue. It's a loss that can never be measured in time. And no amount of time served behind bars can erase the emptiness that Patricia's absence has created. The truth is, no sentence will ever bring Patricia back. No amount of time in prison will fix the damage Keith caused when he took her life. And no apology will undo the years of birthdays, holidays, and memories that Patricia's family will never have the chance to experience with her. Patricia's murder wasn't just a crime against her family. It was a crime against humanity. A senseless act that shattered the lives of everyone involved. Keith Kwiecinski may spend the rest of his life behind bars, but for the Falkenstern family, true peace will only come when they find a way to live in a world without Patricia, a world that's now a little darker. Thanks for following this journey. Keep checking in for more true crime content coming soon.